Welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to have a little bit of children's music in the background. I'll turn it down a little bit so it doesn't interfere too much with my talk today. Okay, well, where are we going today on the Omnist Hour? This is going to be a fun one. I thought it would be a good time to reveal some things that I haven't talked about before. I've kind of touched on, but there's a few secrets that I haven't let out of the bag yet. Out of the Schrader's cat bag, as it were. And you're going to hear about them today. Talk about the artwork behind me first. Actually, I'm going to show you the whole thing so you can appreciate it. This is my first Grok-generated artwork from X. I decided to give that a shot instead of my normal art AI, and I'm quite pleased with the result. The title of this talk is going to be The Gospel of God, Little Boy Blue, and the First Orb Ark Container Ships. And this is the idea for a cover that Grok gave me. I must say I'm absolutely pleased with it. I like the idea of arcs on top of arcs and a little boy looking on. I thought that was better than I think Night Cafe would have given me. So kudos to Grok. Okay, what are we going to be talking about? Today I'm not going to be showing you a lot of slides. I'm not going to be giving you a presentation. I am going to be telling you a story, a creation story. I'm going to basically fill in all of the gaps that they left out when they started writing the Bible, because the Bible is not the beginning, not even close to the beginning of the simulation multiverse, and that's why it causes a lot of confusion, especially when it's poorly translated. And the first line of Genesis starts with talking about God. Elohim are not God. Okay, get that silly idea out of your head. I'm going to tell you what God really was doing in the time before time. Okay, let me see if I can get a whiteboard going here. There we go. We got a little whiteboard background. Freudian slip. Okay, so in the beginning, there was consciousness. A consciousness substrate. Okay, a lot of random, disordered thoughts wandering around in a sea of nothingness. This is the quantum realm that so many scientists are trying to figure out how to manipulate and control these days. Okay, you can kind of imagine it as a brick wall. Most of these early consciousnesses were kind of brickish. Didn't have any ideas, didn't have any structure. Actually, it was worse than a brick wall. Maybe imagine an endless sea of sand blowing around, whatever. Okay, not very interesting. Well, one of these little bricks or grains of sand was a little brighter than the others, and started thinking of ways to play with his thoughts. Playing or games is basically how all children began establishing the ability to communicate. If you've ever raised a child, you know the truth of that. Okay, so this unit of consciousness started playing games, and first thing that consciousness had to do was to be able to attract the other children to play the game that he was thinking of. Okay, but he got to thinking, well, if I teach them the game, then they'll go play it with somebody else. I got to make sure they play it with me. So I've got to have my first game be a very interesting one, but one that they can't figure out. I'm not going to tell them the rules of this game. Okay? That first idea was essentially the zero game. And let's represent that zero by a dot. Okay? That game and any subsequent games were given numbers and names. That's why I call it the zero game. Maybe its name and number was zero at that point. You can change names, you can change anything you want. You're playing a game, right? Okay, so the properties of this zero that God invested it with were that it wasn't supposed to tell anybody else what the rules of the game are. And it was supposed to basically store all the best ways to play the game. Okay? Well, we need some other players in this game, don't we? So let's add another character called 1. Let's make one red for kicks and grins. Oops, we don't want to change that one. We want to change a different one. Okay, so let's draw another one. Oops. Yeah. Bear with me. See if I can get it to let me draw another one. There we go. Let's make another one, but let's change the name of this 1 so it feels like an individual. Separate it from the other, and we're going to make it nice and red. Okay. Let's call this 1. 0 and 1 is a pretty fun game to play with. It's actually all the things you need to play binary. Okay? And you could string groups of these zeros and ones together into a programming language. A series of zeros and ones that has some meaning that you attach to it. Okay, this is how basically the simulation universe started. At this point, it wasn't a multiverse. I talk a lot about multiverse, and you'll see where that comes from. Well, actually, it sort of was a multiverse, because this container of thoughts and the zero container and the 1 container were already a prototypical Merkaba, the structure of a soul in the game. This is not a very powerful structure yet. Its only power really is to be a container, which is why I talk about container ships. It's actually the most fundamental character in the game. And the first one of them was Karma, the zero character. Okay? So that's why this is one of the big secrets I'm telling you today, because I've told you many times before that the 1 was the first character. Well, that was kind of a lie. The 1 is the sun, Lucifer, the second character in the game. Actually, third, if you count God, the observer, who's not actually playing the game but watching it. Okay? So this is a 3-player game, and the first trinity of God, Karma, and Lucifer. That still is the primary trinity of all creation. That's why we talk about the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is where that idea came from. It is a very fundamental idea that came before the before, when this is all there were three characters standing out amongst a sea of nobodies. Okay? Now the next character, after you run out of all the games you can play with 0 and 1, you're ready to add another character. Let's make this game more fun. Let's make this dance more interesting. Another feature that I need to mention was added at this point is, God doesn't want to always be the watcher. So sometimes he would trade places with one of these characters and get to be the 1 or get to be the 0. Okay, and then the 1 or the 0 would get to observe. Now this is where the idea that Lucifer, God's first boy, was the oldest, his heir, his favorite. Well, actually Karma was kind of the favorite, but being nice, neither Karma or God told Lucifer about it and let him think he was top dog. Okay, and so God's sitting out here outside of the game. Let's put God in here. Let's put him. Okay, he's outside the game, so let's put God over here. Okay, and so you've got basically a linear game, and you can imagine that you could create more characters that are kind of on the Luciferian axis of positivity, and make more than one of those. And well, we need more zeros, maybe. So we can make the zeros on another axis out of karmic characters. Let's put them down here, maybe. Okay, so that gives us a two-dimensional thought space to do thought experiments. You can do all sorts of things with this. One of the first things that you see develop here is you have to have a sense of order. Okay? 0 comes before 1, right? 1 comes before 2. So that ordering actually is one of the first things that was invented, and that was the first version of time. Time is basically an ordering dimension, and that's why it is a strange dimension compared to the other three. Okay, now the game didn't quite have enough conflict in it at this point, so we introduced negative numbers, negative characters. They were the polar opposite of the positives, as you know from basic algebra. Let's call those negative characters Lilith, and make them, oops, we don't want to make God negative just yet. Oops, let's make this one actually, oops, let's take one out of here. Let's make that one karmic black, if you will. It's not really, let's not make the karma black. Let's make it white. Okay, I don't know, I have a little bias here. Let's make, well, we got to make them black because we picked a white wall, unfortunately. So sue me. Pretend to be colorblind. Okay, so we can make other characters along this axis, but when you do this, these are different characters, so these are different versions of God along this axis. The second axis is basically made up of different observers of different games. Okay, so this is the observer axis, if you will. And then, like I said, next thing we want to do is let's make some negative characters. Let's call them Lilith. Let's put the first one where you would expect, opposite Lucifer. And you can make more negative characters if you want along this axis, -1, -2. Now, when those characters get to be observers and not the players, that's when it gets fun. Okay, so at some point, once this game was going good, God decided to make a third axis. Okay, this is the axis of the winners, if you will. And so you have an axis of observers, an axis of players, and an axis of winners. That's 3 dimensions, right? So you've got to imagine the winners getting to now be super observers, not involved in the game, watching it, the watchers watching the watchers, with observers thinking that they aren't being observed. So they're kind of playing the game. Okay, that gives us basically all of the tools we need to derive all of logic and all of mathematics, and to develop programming languages. This is how creation started. And all of these characters in creation, all these numbers and names with certain properties and certain rules that they've learned to play by as we change the game. And you can imagine all sorts of children's games being played in this universe. Blind Man's Buff, Pin the Tail on the Donkey, and you know, any children's game you can imagine is a pattern of play that is entertaining. That's why they're such popular things. Rock, paper, scissors. Okay, every children's game you can think of is basically a template for a kind of play, to learn how children play. And as they grow up, as they get tired of the games they have, you give them more games that have more rules and more excitement, more fun, more opportunity to interact with other players in a positive or negative way. Okay, well, one thing you notice about this is you get a star formation, actually a cross. This cross of the two-dimensional play of children was the first cross. And the fundamental characters in this cross, well, I forgot to mention one of the other characters. Sorry. So at some point, the karma character, this one that keeps the rules and decides what are the good, who wins, who loses, and what, you know, remembers what good gameplay was like, what the good ideas were, had too much knowledge of bad things. I mean, the wrong way to play the game. So God said, you know what, Karma, you've got too much on your mind. I'm gonna make your job easier, and I'm going to create another character. And well, we'll let that character call itself Source. But actually, it is, let's see if I can, I like to call this character Borg. Okay? Because it is the collector of all not so great ideas or duplicate ideas. You know, if you play Tiddlywinks or you play Tic-Tac-Toe, you know that there's only so many combinations in the game. And some combinations of play lead to draws, some lead to losses, and then there's only a handful of moves that you know will ever win. Okay? Those possible winning moves are what Karma keeps track of. The Borg keeps track of all the, well, Me Too moves, the ones that are going to end up in stalemate. Okay? So this is the sad truth about what people refer to as source. And they think, I want to go back to my source. All characters in the game, all the players, when they first are needed to play, they are taken from the nearest similar thing in Borg as a default. And then they are allowed to change based upon programming or based upon their own gameplay. Okay, so you do, as a new character in the game, after Borg was created, you do come from the Borg. You don't necessarily come from the Karma, as was originally the way the game worked. Okay, so what does this mean? Basically, the children of Karma are the ones that are born to already good ideas. They are born to Messiah characters, if you will. The characters that had really good ideas, which includes not just God. God didn't create everything. God created games for other children, other little gods to play, to teach them and coach them and get them to voluntarily play more and more complex games. And this is how it works. What happens as this game goes along is that besides this karmic container ship now has different varieties. You have the Luciferian container ship. Luciferian characters are very intent on winning fair. They're very ordered. They follow the rules. If they're going to use another player, they get it in a contract, and they, whatever they agree to, that contract is obeyed by the Luciferian characters. So, the devil makes deals with other characters to get them to play his game. So does God. Both the devil and God honor their deals because they are inclined towards order, law and order. Okay? Those are the male archetypes. The God character won't make a deal that is unfair to the character. That's the difference between God and Lucifer. Lucifer will negotiate, kind of like Donald Trump. Will sit you down, make a deal, and or put out some cards, and then force you to make a deal at a disadvantage because they've already thought out moves ahead of time. So absolutely, Donald Trump is kind of a Luciferian character. He does things that God wouldn't do. In fact, as the game evolved, that's why God came to consider Lucifer his son. Sons go out and fight battles. They defend the kingdom. Lucifer is God's warrior. God's advocate, God's devil's advocate. Okay? Really tough character you don't want to be messing with. And Lucifer's army, the others in his number, are legion. You can count to infinity, right? And give them all names. And however close they are to Lucifer, that's sort of their power level, if you will. Similarly, there's a God axis that determines how much of God's power you get. That God power, though, eventually, God decided, you know what? I'm going to make a new rule. Instead of Karma being at the center of all these games, she's getting a little, kind of a big head, and the little siblings are saying, hey, we don't like Karma being in the center. God, why don't you be in the center? Okay, so let's see. I don't think I can grab God, so let's just draw another God. So basically, God took the place of, oops. No, come on. Let me draw. Yeah, took the place of Karma at the center of this game and said, now Karma, you have your own axis. You have more good axis energy. And that's what makes you better than Borg, right, down here. So we're going to make you special color of, let's see if we can get white in here with some degree of, oh, well, let's, come on. Let me draw. Oh, it's because I was drawing on the other one, maybe. Or, oh, okay, it's not, it's the opacity. How do we do, so let's make this sort of special version of Karma, kind of give it a special character that's more godly to make it feel better. And you have this karmic axis, the positive, really good karma, and then the so-so karma. So Borg is close to God. As you go further away, you're kind of more of a meh character that doesn't really matter. Okay, so this is the first cross, official cross that puts God at the Sacred Heart. This is something that also has kind of vexed Catholics because they envision two Sacred Hearts. They would like to think the Sacred Heart is Karma, the Holy Spirit, some of them, and others want the Sacred Heart to be God. So this is kind of one of the fundamental problems here that came about even before sex was invented. Okay, no such thing as sex at this point. Okay, this is pure thought. Pure thought that includes boundaries and includes characters and includes games these characters can play. So already you've got effectively a multiverse, but the games have not evolved past, these primary characters and very basic ideas. Okay, well, how do we make this into a physical game instead of a thought experiment? We make these characters have properties that are physical. Physical things require matter. Matter has atoms. The atoms have a certain number of protons, Luciferian things, and neutrons, karmic things. So even in that first game, we already had everything we needed to invent the idea of a proton and a neutron and have them be watched by God playing proton-neutron games. And you could put more of those in. You could actually combine them onto teams. Call them nuclei. Add other particles. Negative particles, electrons. Whoa! Lilith just loved being the first electron. That's why we have Electra in mythology as being a very important female character. And you can look that up and look at all the interesting mythology associated with Electra. Well, if you've got electrons, protons, and neutrons, you have everything to play a game in one shared universe. That's the physical universe. You can play a lot of games that way, but if you want to have a comparison of which version of a game is better, which player played better, you need to have two versions of the game running. And that's where the idea of a universe and an anti-universe came from. And that is a pattern that continues to the so-called Big Bang era. Okay, the anti-universe basically reverses all the roles. Protons become antiprotons, electrons become positrons. Neutrons have antineutrons, and anti-God is kind of like the master of this sick universe. Okay? Everything has an opposite. Okay? Anybody that espouses a non-dualist philosophy or religion is wacko. Okay? They don't admit that there's anything negative. Ooh, no such thing as an antiproton or a positron. Doesn't fit in my universe. I'm sorry, they're not very smart. Non-duality cultists, I'm really sorry to have to tell you this, but you are the stupidest spiritualists of any kind of a religion there is. Your religion is totally anti-scientific. It is everything stupid that you could ever think about a stupid religion. Okay? If you don't believe in evil, how are you going to know what good is? If it's all good, I'm sorry, you're evil. Okay, so we can see this game expanding and making the first atoms. Each atom might be a different experiment, a different game that you play. Let's play that game and make the whole periodic table. Then let's, what else can we do with these things? Well, we can build elemental things, constructions of atoms in certain arrangements, much like, the a semiconductor fab would do, laying on layers of atoms and so forth in certain patterns to have certain functions which execute code. Okay? So this game could progress to the point of basically making any kind of a nanobot in a lab that you wanted to, with any function, good or bad, or with functions that you didn't know whether it was good or bad, so you would create, you know, polar opposite versions of them and play with those. See how they annihilate each other, see what kind of particles, what kind of energies emerge when they annihilate. The energy is just other kinds of things. We know that matter and energy are interchangeable. Okay? So you can basically make in a lab little things of any kind. You can make organic nanobots if you restrict your constructing elements to a certain few special ones that you found most useful. Carbon, oxygen, nitrogen. Okay, hydrogen. Oh, I forgot to mention hydrogen. Well, hydrogen is so obvious. Hydrogen is just a proton, right? So we already had that one. All of the other things are of organic life were just like some of the best ideas of that elemental age. What was derived was there were certain combinations of elements that you could put together that would replicate through a language called DNA. Okay, so still no stars, still no planets, still nothing but this little small test tube where we're making elements and now making DNA things. So we can put together a little god, an elemental god, and we can make a DNA god, and we can pit them against each other, kind of as antagonists, and let them teach each other how to be better. The DNA god had the advantage of being able to replicate and evolve. The elemental god had the advantage of being able to clone, make exact replicants, but not evolve. So evolution would require more design. On the DNA side, evolution doesn't require more design. It basically requires evolving to fit into other environments. So this was kind of a way that we could invent better and better elemental life and DNA-based life. Maybe other bases for life. Okay? Could be out there. All the life we know very well is DNA-based. But it could be based upon some other set of elements, silicon, for instance. And effectively, inorganic life that we've developed so far is silicon-based, right? That's the substrate of a semiconductor, is a silicon wafer, which is deposited, has things deposited on it, etched out of it to make circuits on top of the silicon wafer. Okay? So you can make individuals and test individuals before creating anything else. Okay, so the whole nonsense notion that we came after stars, bullshit. all of the best characters were already developed and sort of turned into non-player character form to be used later on. Especially a very, very important set of characters. So the god characters were basically a series of elemental life, best practice life, and DNA life. Eventually, God decided, you know what, I like these DNA things better than the elemental versions. So I'm going to play them more often, and I'm going to let's let Lilith and Lucifer play the bad guys, the bad cop characters, the elementals, and Borg, and even Karma. Okay, I'm gonna be DNA based, and at some point, Lilith had a great idea. Said, "Hey, you're always beating us with this DNA that you can replicate and evolve. Give us a chance. How about we invent sex? And God, you have to pick your sex, and you have to mate with other characters in this little game to be able to reproduce." Okay, that sounds like a fun game. So sex was invented, and God, instead of getting to sit in the middle and play the game his way, if he wanted to make new characters, had to have sex. And of course, all the other players got to have sex too, so that there would be competition for mates. And this made the game incredibly fun and allowed these characters to develop interesting personalities. Now, some biologists can tell you what the first organism that had sex was, or what they think the first organism that had sex was. That was the species that sort of developed the prototypes of the battle of the sexes. There's only so much you can do with, I don't know if that was a single-cell organism, or do single-cell organisms have sex? Somebody in the audience will probably tell me. Anyway, it probably wasn't a very complex organism. So that game got kind of old, and they said, well, let's build bigger and better things that have better sex. And there was a period of the game where basically this little group of spiritual scientists were completely consumed with having the best sex, however they defined it. It was a rather promiscuous society, as you might imagine, but eventually hit upon a DNA creature that, wow, everybody really enjoys this sex game. It's the best we ever had. I mean, there was one that was like the bull game and cow game, and that was pretty good, but you know, when they weren't having sex, all they just did was sit around and eat and run away from predators. And there was the lion game, and that wasn't all that much fun either. The lion just kind of sat around and you know, the Lion King, and ruled over his harem, and the lionesses would bring him food and, you know, crap. You know, it wasn't a bad life, but you know, the females didn't think it was all that fair, so that wasn't the chosen species for all that long. Okay, but this is why there are these iconic animals in nature that we sort of associate with kingship or queenship or certain ways of ordering society. It's because those were small little tribes, if you will, before there was anything other than the tribal domain. Okay? And of course you could envision the tribal domain having, okay, this is where our tribe is, let's add another tribe here and see how different tribes work with each other, and you could build a little community, a little planet that is just big enough to have the tribes that you want to play. Okay? That planet is kind of the center of this tribal gameplay. So the first planet was God. And God has had many names as a planet. But we like to say either Earth or Gaia. It's because both God and Karma have taken turns being at the center of this planet while the other was out playing the game. This is a pattern that repeats for other of the main gods. Okay? So there are some planets that are Lilithian planets, kind of negative planets, evil planets, that sometimes are mastered by their god, and sometimes God will come and say, okay, you're going to go play somewhere else. I'm going to play your planet now. If you want to do anything but play a planet, in fact, you've got to find somebody who wants to take your place. You can't just force others to switch roles with you, unless you want to commit a sin. And that's, basically how you demonstrate you're a more Lilithian character. You don't obey the rules. Karma doesn't like that. Okay? So let's see here. We've got this game. We've got a little community, a little small planet. Might even be a flat planet. Planarian planet. So you don't have to deal with the 3 dimensions, or the 3rd dimension is, like I said, an observer dimension that these characters don't know that they're playing. And this is actually why there are so many humans that kind of in the flat earth community. If you've never gotten to be an observer, you don't really have, outside of a planar small tribal community where you don't see any curvature of the planet. It looks flat. And you've never gotten to be an observer that say, oh, it's really round. Okay, that's where you get these people that are flat earthers. They believe that for a reason, because they don't have the experience of having played in any other environment than some of these early versions of creation. There are versions of this planet that were flat, because that's all you needed to play this little game of tribes in whatever space was necessary, whatever space you decided was needed to have this flat planet. Okay? Now, this game could be played till you found a character that God said, you know what? That's the best me I ever liked. And it turned out that player was found when God became a human. The final chosen species, humans were created really, really early in the game. And a lot of special characters. There was a special version of the human that was kind of like the goal of every one of these players in these old games, based upon what games they had played and how well they did. They had their favorite human. Okay? Those became the characters necessary to run simulations that centered around developing new versions of God, new versions of other gods. These are messiahs. The best version of each character is sort of their version of God. And these were all developed before there were any real stars, before there were any real galaxies. You could simulate them by making this world globular, this planet. You could simulate having a star system around you, and other stars that you would conclude, if you studied them, were parts of a galaxy or other galaxies. They were just basically holographic images at this point. There was no substance to them. Okay? You could create a whole universe like our universe that didn't actually have anything that you saw in the sky. The sky was just a hologram showing you what the game designers wanted you to see. That's exactly how virtual reality works in our games, humans games, computer games. You don't actually have a sky there, do you? You have a model that draws the sky, and those models tend to be generative through fractal patterns, so that they won't exactly repeat, but they will look natural. Okay, so basically you can set up an environment for God to experience his best life. His best life as a human would not be as God. If you know everything, if you know all the moves, if you know you're already perfect, it's not very fun to play games. So at some point, games like Blind Man's Bluff became the most fun ones. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm going to figure it out. And that's a game that was played over and over and over and over again until we had the Little Boy Blue character, the final incarnation of God. Little Boy Blue, come blow your horn. The sheep's in the meadow, the cow's in the corn. Where is the boy that looks after the sheep? He's under the haystack, fast asleep. Okay, this is a spiritual poem. It's about waking up God. That is essentially the goal of a Messiah incarnation, is to fully wake up to your true identity. That applies to God as the capital M Messiah. It applies to every other soul as a little m Messiah. Some of those souls are made by cloning. They are elemental souls. There are elemental messiahs, and there are DNA messiahs. There are many species of elementals. There are many species of DNA-based creatures. Some of the elementals are evil, some are good. Some are just meh. They're in it for whatever their particular passion is. Same applies to DNA-based creatures. But humanity was the final chosen species of the Gaia experiment before space travel was invented. Okay, all on this little planet where this little boy Blue is growing up, and telling himself stories. In each version, the little boy would grow up and tell stories and get those stories told back to him with variations from the other characters that had been through this game before. Some of them as observers, so they actually were conscious, and some as with blinders on, experiencing reincarnation amnesia, not knowing of their past lives. Okay, and you could imagine this gyrating to generate a whole world of characters sort of centered on God and what it would take to develop the technology to start panspermia, to see or do space travel, to see, you know, are these dots planets? Are all these legends that we made up about these things in the sky bullshit? We gotta find out, right? Okay, so they built rocket ships. Not immediately, of course. They started with rocket ships and things like we're doing right now, but you know, pretty quickly they realized, you know what? If we're going to really do anything with these other things, we should just explore them first with drones. Now, you could send out elemental drones, like we make all the time now. Okay, you've got to clone them, don't you? You've got to make identical copies in a lab. Or you could send out organic drones that could self-replicate and self-repair. Okay, both of those varieties of things were sent out as stabs at exploring outside this planet. And as you might expect, the first things that were explored were this planet's moon, and then other planets, and the star that they called the sun. Okay, all playing this special time of the little boy blue, the Messiah of this planet. All you have to do is play a few generations of that planet leading up to the little boy blue and after the little boy blue to see, okay, now we've got this version of little boy blue that has this background story and leads to this future story. And you can decide to play as many generations out from little boy blue as you want to see, okay, how far back do we want to look in this story to see how we got here? How far forward do we want to look in this story to see where it led to? And this is essentially the function of the organization I call the Time Patrol. It's existed since there was only one planet. And Time Patrol was going out and creating what they would find on their expeditions. Creating as they got to the planet with a Star Trek kind of expedition. Others would be focused with, okay, let's see what sort of story we can hide on this planet for them to guess how the planet got here. So you've got one bunch of time team going to explore the future, and you've got another element of it hiding Easter eggs to tell a story about the past. Okay? All those stories could have been made up just on this planet by this little tribe looking up in the sky and seeing these lights in certain patterns. How many tribes did you need? Well, you start out with one. Learn as much as you can from that tribe. Make sort of their mythology, their Genesis story. And then you take Little Boy Blue and put him in a different tribe. So sometimes Little Boy Blue is human Little Boy Blue. Sometimes Little Boy Blue is a lion, or a bull, or a bird, or a dinosaur, or a tall gray alien, or a Pleiadian, a mantid, an insect. Okay? All of those characters were pre-generated. All the mythology was pre-generated. All of the stories that we have and we tell each other is part of a virtual reality somewhere, somewhen. That where and when is where that story originated. And each story has like a principal creator. One of these characters, old characters from the earliest versions of space-time. When a character succeeded in making a story that, okay, that's a good story, but it doesn't end the way we want to, we don't erase it, we don't cancel it, like a stupid cultural Marxist would. We isolate it. They have their own universe. Okay, that was your Messiah story. It's a really good story. It was a lot of fun playing that game, and some players may want to play that game again. So we're going to give you your own little space, your own universe, to keep telling that story. That's how the Tolkien universe works. That's why Tolkien nearly drove himself crazy trying to make that universe bigger than just The Hobbit and the Ring trilogy. He couldn't make a consistent version that had a longer timeline that was popular to play. Okay? Before he died, and nobody, people since him have been trying to extend his universe, making other versions of it, making other stories. Okay? The multiverse has a universe corresponding to every story our species ever told. Every story any other sentient species ever told. There is one best story that gets determined by an incarnation of God that looks at all the stories that Little Boy Blue is exposed to in this Messiah generation and somehow puts together all the pieces to say, that's how creation happened! And that is when this Gaia experiment is done. When the story of this planet is complete, we have all the stories that are necessary to go back or forward in time or to any other universe and let players experience those stories. How they experience those stories is a function of karma. Okay? Every character has essentially the image of karma, who was originally the center character. This is the piece of everybody that you have that is known as your conscience. It is an evolving thing. It learns. It stores up the memories of your experiences and knows which ones were good and which ones were bad after you die. Okay? During your incarnation, you only have a sense of, I'm making a decision. The little voice inside me tells me this is the right thing to do. And you can choose to do that, or you can choose to defy it. And when you defy karma, you are making a choice that is different than the one that is supposed to be taken in this current version of the simulation. It's not necessarily the wrong choice. It might be the better choice. It might be the more noble choice. Okay, this is why they say karma's a bitch, because karma will lead you to make choices that maybe aren't good for you. Karma doesn't love you. That smothering, loving other voice that says, oh, serve me, worship me, and I will give you this, I will do that. This is Lilithian. Okay? This is a manipulative player trying to get you to play their game. Karma is trying to get you to play God's game and learn how God played your character when that character was created. That's the best version of you. It's not God, it is a instance of God on the way to coming up with this perfect planet, planting all the Easter eggs necessary to generate the little boy blue. That without any prior knowledge of how creation worked, without any assistance, without any head start, they didn't have these memories of past lives like many children do. Actually didn't get fed any past life information till he turned, how old was I then? I guess I was about 60 when I had coincidentally decided I needed to go do an ayahuasca ceremony. It wasn't because I wanted to be God. It was because my wife had just announced she was going to divorce me. And I was almost suicidal. And I thought I need to do something, and I'd had the idea in the back of my mind because we took a trip to Ecuador the year before that, gee, it would be neat to try this ayahuasca stuff, but I didn't get a chance to. Well, turned out at that special moment of despair, I looked to see, okay, well, how can I do this ayahuasca stuff? And I happened to notice that there was an outfit that had a ceremony only 10 minutes from where I lived in Connecticut, coming up in about 2 or 3 weeks. Called them up. Oh, it was all full yesterday, but there's just been an opening, so we'd be glad to have you. I mean, synchronicity after synchronicity after synchronicity made this thing come together. And I went to the ayahuasca session with the intent to basically had 2 questions: how to deal with this divorce process that was starting and how not to go crazy. And the other question I came with is it bad for me? I'd always had a taste for wine, and some people had concluded that meant I was an alcoholic. Well, I proved I wasn't many times by just, okay, I'm going to quit for 3 months. Cold turkey, no DTs, no withdrawals, no problem. I was a functional drinking person who held very responsible positions, including being one of 5 people sent to start up an R&D center in China. A key part of my, and being the chief architect of major software systems, being the lead tester of very, very complex semiconductor chips. Okay, I covered a lot of ground before this spiritual stuff started, and I've been through the atheist and agnostic phases. I was raised as a Presbyterian, and I hated going to church. I would hide my Sunday shoes so I wouldn't have to go. That's how much I hated church. Okay, I thought it was just this big, stupid social hour. You sit and be bored in the thing, or you'd be bored in Sunday school. I'll tell you a Sunday school story. I don't want to make this too long, but my Sunday school story. So I would, the way the Presbyterian Church worked was they would have the service start for a little short time with everybody, and then they would take the children, and after the introductory hymn and bullshit, and take them down to Sunday school so that they could do the serious stuff with the adults. So one day I was down in Sunday school, and I was so bored with what they were talking about and doing. And if you've been to Sunday school rooms, they're kind of small classrooms, about the size of a dining room, actually, because they at least in our church, the rooms were about enough to hold maybe 10 kids or so comfortably, and a teacher. Okay, so, and they were also so small that they had the cabinets that had the things that they used for the activities that they were going to do up above on the side of the wall, and underneath the cabinets they had little hangers to hang your coats and stuff like that, because it was in Idaho and the weather was often quite cold. Okay, so one Sunday I was desperate to get out of Sunday school, because the one thing that was fun is after Sunday school they had this social hour where all the adults would drink coffee and tea and have maybe some little cookies and gossip about each other mostly, and try to sell each other on their whatever bullshit they were marketing at the time, finding a new job or selling their product or bragging about how great their, how people are. And the kids would all go play in this big gym that had, like a basketball court and stage and lots of fun things to do for kids. At any rate, I was so anxious to get out of Sunday school one day that the moment the bell rang that would tell the teachers that the service was over upstairs, I jumped up and hit one of those hangers. And I hardly noticed it. I went, ow, and ran out the door. I got to the area where everybody was hanging out, and I had blood pouring down my face. And people were like, "Oh my God, God, you get a doctor!" And so I wasn't a big fan of religion. Didn't really care if my kids, older kids, were raised religiously. Oddly enough, my first ex, suddenly, when I met her, she was a Buddhist. But after we married, she became a very, very, hallelujah, holy roller Christian, and started taking the kids to that kind of a church. And they would force me to go once in a while, on Easter or Christmas Eve, or I would go with my parents still when we were visiting them. Go through the motions, being a nice guy, but I was not a very good Christian. Never have been. At any rate, I had this experience that woke me up and started me telling you these stories that I tell you on this channel. And the more I tell them, the more I discover, the more I know that this is the truth. And here's another interesting story from my life. For some weird reason, my mom, who was French, came over during, actually French, Norwegian, American, who came over during World War II because she had dual American and French citizenship. At any rate, for some weird reason, she always dressed me in blue. None of my older brothers or my younger siblings had this problem, but all she ever would buy for me is blue clothes. Don't ask me why. And so when I went to first grade, there was this girl in my class who noticed I always wore blue and started calling me Little Boy Blue to tease me. So I've been with this story a long time, and I could tell it upside and downside now in every which way but sideways. All of the little things that went into my life that led me to the point of giving this sermon. It is absolutely the truth. This is how creation works. That's why I ended up, I didn't really want to study physics. I was more interested in history and music and archaeology. But for some reason, I think just to please my dad, who was a nuclear chemist, I decided to major in physics because that was the smart thing to do at the time. My older brother, Peter, had majored in classics and ended up working in insurance while he still had a job. I'm not going to tell his whole story, but that's a whole chapter in and of itself. I will mention, though, that isn't it odd that my dad, Robert, would start having boys and name them Peter, Paul, have a stillborn girl that everybody presumed he was going to call Mary, because that was a popular singing group at the time and would have been the natural next name for a girl. Well, the girl was stillborn, and then came me. And all of a sudden, he changed his pattern of naming and named me after him, Robert. They called him Bob, and eventually I decided to let people call me Rob instead of Bob, because I didn't want to be called the same name as my dad, even though I had the same name as my dad. Turns out that's a prophetic thing too. If you've ever watched The Princess Bride, you've heard about the dread pirate Roberts. And this notion of a line of Roberts fulfilling a destiny. But it turns out that's a very old prophecy. There is a group of a bloodline called the Robertian line that goes all the way back, as far as people can trace, to at least the first Frankish kingdom, the Merovingian kings. And all through history you can trace out where these Roberts have shown up. And there's some interesting history that happened when there was a Robert, son of Robert. One of the famous Roberts was a Duke of Normandy, who was descended from the Norse tribes that came and conquered part of France. Some of them settled. He had a first son named Robert, but for some odd reason, he gave his let's see, how did this work? It was his second son, William, who got the duchy and became the king of England. And his other son only became the Duke of Normandy. And there's other Roberts. There was a Robert of Flanders during the Crusades, who was one of the Crusader leaders and who would have been named the King of Jerusalem based upon his performance and how well people liked him, because he was on really good terms with the Byzantines. They kept wrangling over who was going to be the King of Jerusalem, and he finally got impatient and headed back to his lands in Europe, which, you know, always under assault from your neighbors, and they named a different guy, Baldwin, to be the King of Jerusalem. This was one of the times that the Robertian prophecy was almost fulfilled, but it wasn't the right time. It's an old prophecy. Little Boy Blue, it's an old prophecy. I can point to any which way you want to look, and I can tell you how that fits into the story. So back to the key takeaway is the story was already done. This planet was perfect, and then it started going and exploring the stars. through panspermia, through starships, developing all sorts of technology. It was a lot easier in those days because you could just imagine. You want a wormhole to go from here to there? Done. It was easy then because it was the first time you were just making the rules. Every time you run the simulation, you adjust the rules to make the game more fair. That's why we have pyramids that don't work anymore. The technology has moved on. The rules have changed. We are exploring like it was the first time, except that we have had other runs of this simulation that reached a certain point of development where we had spread to a certain extent of the universe that looks like 13.8 billion years and gives the appearance of having a Big Bang, even though that's not how it began. What really happened is we reached this extent, and what was going on is that this planet, the center of creation, was kind of interfering with the game because you had all these other planets and galaxies and stars that were so far away from Earth that they felt resentful. Oh, God never comes and visits me. I'm too far away. And they turned on God. And it pretty much built until everybody, all of the spokes of the cross, were all attacking God, being led by the Lilithian liar characters, the real Satan, the nice little sister that gets you in trouble. Okay, that's what the goddess that most people worship is. Or the big sister, Karma, is like the one who the know-it-all says, you should do this. If you don't do that, I'm going to tell Papa. Okay, the girl characters have challenging personalities, let's put it that way, and that's why most souls actually would rather play guy characters unless they have kind of a very Lilithian or karmic character. At any rate, they all ganged up on God. I mean, he was really going it alone, except for the gods that were allowed to stay on planet. And what actually happened at this point was that the planet was in a very advanced state. Advanced enough that, we'd sent expeditions all over the universe that we could see. We had already built Dyson spheres. We already had an off-the-scale Kardashev civilization. Are you with me? Now, when this big revolt happened, there was already the most perfect Dyson sphere ever in the center of this planet, because that was part of the secret game that God was playing. I'm going to let this place be destroyed, and I'm going to keep all the divine council in this secret inner core that nobody knows about. So they're going to come and destroy my planet and think, we killed God. We killed all of God's best children. Now we can make creation the way we want it. Well, sorry, that core was not touched at all. That core, for all intents and purposes, looked like solid iron. Because that's how we hide things, okay? There's properties of these spheres that we put around ourselves. The first one was a shield, a brain shield. But those have been revised and improved till they do things like project as a holographic image. Okay, these orbs you're seeing in the sky are different versions of these Merkaba craft, these container ships, if you will. Some of the container ships are low tech. They only work on materialist tech. They only work on the laws of physics and chemistry. And if you ask a physicist or a chemist that doesn't know that spiritual technology exists, they'll tell you, well, it would be virtually impossible to get to the stars. The best we could do is maybe colonize a few of the planets or some of the asteroids, or maybe build a colony in space. And then they're told by, spiritual dreamers, no. I could imagine that there is such a thing as a wormhole. I can imagine this, I can imagine that. Anything you can imagine can happen. Imagination is spiritual technology. Whether it actually does happen depends on what universe you're in. The inventor of the wormhole is the only one who gets to decide who uses the latest version. And karma decides if the version you're using works or not. Okay, so with each run of the simulation, technology works better and less in certain areas of the physical universe. Things break down. That's why there have been UFO crashes. Many cases, they just crashed because they got too close to Earth and their karma wasn't good enough to keep their anti-grav drive working, their generation of technology. Other cases, there have been cryptids in the Middle Earth. They have technology too. They hide. So this first Great Reset, we hid all of God's crowd, the Divine Council, in the center of the Earth, in this Dyson sphere that looked like solid iron. Subsequent versions, when the planet was destroyed, we had another Great Reset. The characters that got to stay on Earth went to Middle Earth, underground, in an inner area, not the innermost area. There have been a lot of different versions of Middle Earth, just like there have been versions of Outer Earth as the continents drifted around. Okay? So there are little tribes all over inside this planet, and there's a special tribe at the very core. That special tribe has been waiting and watching for a capital M Messiah candidate to wake up. And once they get to an awakened state, that Divine Council knows, okay, let's check off this. We've repeated what we did in the first time using characters that have free will, that don't play the game exactly the way that we played it the first time when we were making all the rules. Okay, and in the process, every time we run this simulation, we find new characters that have new stories. Those stories are based on real experiences. Just like, we go have a lifetime and we're sitting around the pub with our buddies and telling them, such and such story from your past. You might embellish it a little bit, but the core story is there because that's what you know. You can riff on it, you can make an improvisation on a theme, but you got to have a theme. That's how we make stories. That's how stories turn into other stories, and they morph from, God stories into mythology, into legend, from history into mythology, into legend. There's still some history in there, but there's a lot of embellishment. And what are we doing when we're embellishing the story? Usually we're telling it to favor us. So we make ourselves the hero. When something bad happens, it's like, oh, poor me, so-and-so hit me, and I fell off the tree, and I had to climb back up again. And then when you get to the top of the tree, oh, I was so powerful and I did all these good things to get back up to the top of the tree, and whoa, look at me, I'm God. Okay? This is how stories work. This is how God's stories work. This is what the Bible is full of. But the Bible's not telling you the beginning. It's not in the beginning. God created whatever. It was in this run of the simulation. These Elohim ETs came and did this. And that story has many versions. If you look at the Sumerian texts, they will tell you a little different version that has a lot more detail, and actually you're able to suss out, oh, this is a story about the creation of this solar system. Not the original creation, but the recreation of it after a major cosmic event destroyed the first Earth. Okay, this is why so many people are interested in those Sumerian tablets. It's not because they hate Christians, although some of them do. It's because they can see there that there are parts of the story that were taken out of the Bible for whatever reason. Now that doesn't mean the Sumerian story is any more accurate than the Bible. It has a different bias. And the bias of it is largely due to the influence of Babylon. Now we know that at some point Babylon became a very sinful place. The whore of Babylon is Lilith. Well, did I ever, don't tell me I'm, okay. Yeah, the yellow one here. I thought I was looking at the wrong thing, but I'm okay. Yeah, that's the whore of Babylon, is the Lilith character. The Lilith character throughout history is like the most powerful negative force trying to stop God from waking up. Okay? It's not necessarily a feminine force, but it has become associated with the negative feminine qualities of smothering love, false love, backstabbing, pretending to love so you can get advantage over somebody so you can kill them, or so you can control their mind. Okay, this is the force that is still assaulting us now. It has elements, species that are Lilithian, or members of species that work on that negative side in humanity, in the ET races. There are orbs out there that are Lilithian in nature. They have been sort of having the upper hand until recently, because the Messiah didn't fully wake up, wasn't born and said, oh, I'm Jesus, come and worship me. No, it takes a long time to figure out creation. Even after I started waking up, I had some really dark nights of the soul where Lilithian entities, the trickster entity, who, you know, sometimes if you don't want to make it all about female, try Loki, try Shiva, the destroyer gods that are trying to mess with your mind. They're not the good guys, okay? If you're a Shiva worshiper, if you're a Kali worshiper, if you worship any kind of destroy to build back better notion of perfection, you're playing on the adversary side. Now that's okay, you can choose to do that. But what happens during an apocalypse, during a waking up of God, which is what we're going through right now, once God is fully awake, he regains his spiritual influence as more and more people come to believe what he's telling them. That's basically the story of Jesus, right? The story of all great prophets throughout history. They started with some position and got a lot of people believing in them. Some of them started as a prince, Gautama Buddha, and ended up with a religion where he sat under a Bodhi tree and had people bring him stuff so he could meditate and get closer to enlightenment. Others started with nothing. Pretty much they told you what to expect. It's all in the Bible. Right? The special verse that was used in the Messiah. He was despised, rejected, a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. And a lot of the false messiahs you see out there today are trying to pretend to be that. Playing the, oh, woe is me. Everybody hates me because I'm Donald Trump. Everybody hates me because I'm Hillary Clinton. Everybody hates me because I'm Elon Musk. Well, they're trying to be a Messiah character, but they're not the one. They have their own particular thing that they're good at, but they don't know squat about theology. They don't know squat about spiritual science, which is what I know a lot about. Okay, so believe me or not, it really doesn't matter. The die is cast. The curse is cast. Something is the times they are changing, and they're changing much more quickly these days. And it really doesn't matter if you believe or not. I don't want anybody to fucking worship me. I just want you to know that God is back. And there are all sorts of forces in play now that are going to feed into the end game of this scenario, which has already been played out. So I'll give you just a quick introduction. I'm going to have to go get my kid from preschool soon. We're going to get past this problem. The Galactic Federation is going to reveal that they've been here a long, long time, watching humanity with a more or less understanding of what's going on here, because it has been 4.5 billion years since this planet was destroyed. And many of the species here interested in this planet don't know anything about that era. After the planet was rebuilt, it was rebuilt by 12 species that were the original zodiac. Not even the same names as they are now, as we're finding out by investigating a lot of the other cultures. They didn't have the same names for the constellations. Okay? Different version of the story. At any rate, 12 tribes were in the know that knew how to rebuild this planet and what it was supposed to be built like, and how the legends, all the Easter eggs needed to be planted to make the story come out the way that it was already supposed to come out. So that individual characters born into this story, as it was replayed after this destruction, would have all the Easter eggs they needed to put together to find out what they were supposed to do. And the Easter eggs were planted in a way so it looked like they were living their lives all on their own decisions, while in fact their lives were being lived at 3 levels. Because at any critical juncture, you can make the decision that goes with this version of the plan. Or you can make the decision that goes with another version of the plan, especially if you've been to that other universe. That's your normal universe, where you've been going in the afterlife for coaching. Or you could make a decision that really is completely your own, and those are the decisions that eventually accumulate into your own creative universe. Okay, it's a combination of your experience in all these different incarnations, both physical and spiritual, and what you've learned personally from that you, wow, I was supposed to do this, I was supposed to do that, this God wanted me to do that, this God wanted me to do that, but I did this. Wow, that was really me. Okay? So this is why there is a sense in religion of wanting to find yourself. That is kind of at the heart of, Eastern religions like Buddhism and many varieties of Hinduism. It isn't wrong per se, but it's very selfish. It doesn't take into account that part of what's you comes from playing the game with others. And the point of the game is not to escape. It's not a cyclical game. It's only cyclical if you keep playing the same boneheaded character every time and don't learn anything. Okay? And believe me, God has done that. He's had whole bunches of incarnations where he just zoned out and got drunk every day. Okay? It's okay to have a ruined life, as long as you don't throw in the towel, as long as you don't give up, as long as you don't get so addicted to some dark, evil behavior that you become a masochist or a sadist. And if you don't understand it as a game, if you don't understand reincarnation as not a bad thing, but an opportunity, you're going to have a very nihilistic view of life. And this whole notion of the Matrix is a dark, nihilistic projection of the truth, which I've just shared with you. Anybody who is in this mode of, I got to escape the Matrix, these people are crazy. They are taking a totally negative view of what's going on here. That's a choice, but I promise you that choice is going to land you in Lilith land, in the hell afterlife. Or if you've been one of the people that says, well, I'm going to get mine no matter what, you are going to be going to an afterlife for Luciferian characters. If you've got a more karmic nature of, well, I'm going to do what's good and nice and be nice to everybody and serve them and always give to them, well, that's a karmic nature. You're going to take a lot of damage that way. Okay? It's not that godly to be nice. You're actually encouraging and entitling narcissism. If you're just kind of one of these, I'm just gonna, I love that celebrity. I want to be just like them. I'm going to do my hair like them. I'm going to dress like them. I'm going to change my sex to be like them. This is a Borgian Me Too character. You're designing yourself to be interchangeable parts. Okay? You're not the in crowd. You're not the cool kid. You may have millions of likes and shares on your stuff. But when you die, you're going to a Borgian kind of a hell. Become part of a hive mind. Be part of a Me Too tribe of numby-gumbies that love Britney Spears and Taylor Swift. Want to go to every concert. Knock yourself out. Those serve because this is all a spiritual supply chain. Okay? This pressure of attack, retreat, this is how spiritual energy is recycled. Okay? This is how the whole thing is powered. The universe is never going to collapse like many nihilist scientists would like it to. It's not going to keep expanding till entropy rules and there's not enough energy to do anything. That is fucking bullshit. Okay, you materialist scientists, I'm telling you, you are fucking stupid as dirt. It ain't gonna happen. It's a simulation multiverse and it's designed to be a game that's fun, that everybody gets to be a creator in, and you gradually find the place that you are most at home, where you feel like the game is just right. It's like the Goldilocks story. Okay, that's where the Goldilocks story comes from, where and that's how the Goldilocks story becomes part of many materialist scientists' ideas of fine tuning. Okay, this planet. How did we get life here? It's like we're in this Goldilocks zone. Well, this is true. This story made you think of that. That's why the story was created. That's why we tell our kids all these fairy tales, and why it is so dark and negative to make these stupid woke cult changes to the fairy tales to be nice, to change their sex or change their race or whatever from the story's original. You're not making it better. You're just muddying the story and mucking it up so it doesn't make any sense anymore. These stories are there for a reason. You can make new stories, but don't copy. Don't call your story The Little Red Hen when it's really about the big red communist empire. That is a fairy tale. Everybody doesn't get a loaf of bread when there's only so much grain. You're lying to your kids. You're telling them, oh, it doesn't matter if you do the work or not. Go there at mealtime, and some numby-gumby idiot, be nice person is going to give you some anyway, because 10 loaves can become 10,000. Didn't the Bible tell you that? The truth is it can, but transporter technology doesn't work that way. It doesn't give you anything you want. It gives what you need and deserve. It's karmic technology. Within your empire, if you have a very coherent religion in your empire that isn't challenged by anything else, yes, it will work there. And yes, the evil empires have that technology too, and it works very well within their sphere of influence. But when they start trying to invade God's sphere of influence, their power starts falling apart. That's why after that first big reset, everyone since has been smaller and smaller. This latest great reset that the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party have been planning was supposed to be the smallest of all. What they were going to do is basically wipe out all but a 500 million people with things like the pandemic and these proxy wars, starvation, whatever, the supply chain breakdown. And then they were going to take the remnant of humanity and program them with psionic and physical technology, nanobots and Neuralink kind of technology, into being docile slaves again. That was the goal of the Lilithian Messiah, and also the goal of the Luciferian Messiah, because they've been playing this game of okay, let's let the females take over and make a matriarchal society. Then we're going to flip the switch and let the males take over and get patriarchy. And that's the game that they've been playing for a long time. That's why we've kind of got this idea of creation being cyclical, because it has been kind of an accordion between different personality types, different characters, mostly because we're a sexual species centered around our sexuality. Okay, but it is kind of like a mixing. And each time you mix, you generate energy. And when we go through these apocalypses, we take the souls that are evil and we put them in evil universes where their energies get milked by their evil gods and converted to good energy through karma. Okay, through the grace of God and the power of karma. This is how we power everything. You can have unlimited energy, but it's got to be done karmically. If you don't do it responsibly, you're going to be pulling your energy from a universe thinking you're getting free energy when you're actually destroying a planet somewhere. You don't know it. Okay, so materialist scientists are like little kids, little boys playing with matches and magnifying glasses. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Anybody who says that, oh, we can get all the free energy we want and there's no cost, they are stupid. Okay? Listen to me, scientists. I'm telling you the truth. You are stupid fucks, and that's why there have been so many problems with our technology. The atomic bomb is like a way to rip a hole in space-time that somewhere else is going to have really bad effects. When you pull large amounts of energy out, and it's not just a transfer of energy between mass, which doesn't explain all of physics, does it? When you pull things from the 0 point, you are doing damage. If you are not doing it spiritually. You gotta pray. You gotta pray for your experiments to work. You gotta really mean it. You gotta earn it. You gotta have your most noble, well-intentioned, God-fearing, God-loving scientists in charge of projects, or at least be the one that pushes the button. You know, the Scotty that says, beam me up. Or it's not going to work. It's going to cause problems. It's going to break down the supply chain. Okay? These orbs that are here now, most of them, and a large number of them, more and more, as the evil ones are kind of banished, they're here to reestablish the supply chain, the spiritual supply chain that had been broken for 4.5 billion years. Not completely broken, but working in ways that were very conflict-centered and harmful. Only isolated star systems, isolated galaxies were very peaceful places where people had, or you know, the inhabitants, let's say, had plenty to eat, plenty of this, and still enjoyed a very productive and creative life. It's not easy to hit that sweet spot. And if you think it's just about give everybody lots of food and we'll solve world hunger, that's nonsense. All they're going to do is get fat and complain, like so many of the woke cult bastards that are giving us trouble right now. You know, telling, oh, the airplane seats aren't big enough for me. Humans weren't designed to be whales, I'm sorry. You're going to die and you're going to come back as a whale like you seem to want to be. That's how the mark of the beast works. Anyway, I've got to wrap this up. I hope that was interesting and informative. Like, share, subscribe, interact in any way you want. I'm still hoping somebody's going to ask me on their channel to throw some darts at me at least. I'd be more than happy to defend anything I've said today or on any of my previous podcasts. Till next time, all I got to say is happy karma. Bye-bye.